Sarah Mitchell walked through the empty parking garage at 11:30 p.m., her heels clicking against the concrete floor. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows between the parked cars. She had stayed late at the accounting firm again, finishing the quarterly reports that her boss needed first thing Monday morning. At 47 years old, Sarah had built a reputation as the most reliable senior accountant at Henderson & Associates. Her colleagues saw her as the quiet, dependable woman who always brought homemade cookies to office parties and never missed a deadline. What they didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell had a secret that could save her life. The parking garage felt different tonight. Sarah's instincts, honed by years of training most people could never imagine, picked up on subtle details. A van parked in an unusual spot near the exit. The faint smell of cigarette smoke where smoking wasn't allowed. The sound of footsteps that stopped when she stopped, started when she started walking again. Sarah's hand moved casually to her purse, fingers finding the small tactical flashlight she always carried. To anyone watching, she looked like a middle-aged office worker checking for her car keys. In reality, she was preparing for a threat assessment that might save her life. The attack came without warning. A man stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, his face covered by a ski mask. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym. His movements suggested military training, but Sarah noticed immediately that his stance was wrong for someone with real combat experience. He held a knife like someone who had learned from movies rather than actual instruction. "Give me your purse and jewelry," he demanded, his voice trying to sound threatening. "Do it now, and maybe you won't get hurt." Sarah's heart rate stayed perfectly steady. She had faced much worse than this during her 25 years of training that began when she was just 18 years old. The man thought he was dealing with an easy target, a woman alone in a parking garage, probably carrying cash and credit cards worth stealing. He had no idea who he was really facing. "Please, I don't want any trouble," Sarah said, her voice shaking just enough to sound convincing. She took a step backward, appearing to comply with his demands. "I'll give you whatever you want." The man's confidence grew. He stepped closer, the knife pointing toward her chest. This was exactly what Sarah had been trained to handle, though her instructors had never imagined she would use these skills while wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase full of tax documents. Sarah's training had begun in 1998, when she was barely out of high school. Her father, Commander James Mitchell, had served 3 tours with the Navy SEALs before retiring to become a private military contractor. When Sarah expressed interest in law enforcement, her father suggested she might benefit from some real tactical training. "The police academy is good," he had told her over dinner one night. "But if you really want to protect yourself and others, you need to learn what the SEALs learn." What started as basic self-defense lessons quickly became something much more intensive. Sarah discovered she had natural aptitudes that impressed even her father's former teammates. Her small frame, 5 feet 4 inches and 130 pounds, actually worked in her favor. She could move quietly, strike precisely, and disappear into crowds where larger operatives would stand out. But Sarah's path took an unexpected turn during her second year of training. Her father was killed in a contractor operation overseas, and Sarah found herself questioning whether she wanted to follow the military route she had been preparing for. Instead, she enrolled in college to study accounting, thinking she would leave her tactical training behind. Her father's former team had other ideas. "Your father saved my life twice," Sergeant First Class Mike Torres had told her at the funeral. "The least we can do is make sure his daughter can save her own." The training continued in secret. Every weekend for 25 years, Sarah had maintained the skills her father's team taught her. Hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical awareness, escape and evasion, counter-surveillance. The complete curriculum that turned ordinary people into elite operators. Her accounting career provided perfect cover. No one suspected that the quiet woman who specialized in corporate tax law could disable an armed attacker in seconds, or that she maintained tactical fitness standards that would challenge Marines half her age. Now, facing her first real threat in decades, Sarah's training kicked in automatically. The attacker lunged forward, bringing the knife toward her chest in a sloppy, overconfident thrust.
Sarah's response was immediate and devastating.
She stepped slightly to the left, grabbed his wrist with both hands, and used his own momentum to slam his arm against the concrete pillar behind her.
The knife clattered to the ground.
Before the attacker could react, Sarah drove her knee into his solar plexus with enough force to drop him to his knees. Her follow-up elbow strike to the back of his neck was precisely calculated enough to incapacitate him without causing permanent damage.
The entire encounter lasted less than 8 seconds.
The man lay face down on the garage floor, groaning and trying to catch his breath. Sarah calmly picked up the knife, her training automatically assessing it as a cheap kitchen blade rather than a tactical weapon. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice steady as she reported an attempted assault.
"This is Sarah Mitchell.
I'm in the parking garage at 455 Commerce Street.
A man just attempted to rob me with a knife. He's currently unconscious.
I'll need police and paramedics." While waiting for the authorities, Sarah reflected on how strange it felt to actually use her skills in real life. For 25 years, the training had been theoretical practice scenarios with fellow students, simulated operations, fitness challenges that pushed her to her limits. Tonight was the first time she had needed to protect herself against a genuine threat.
The police arrived within 6 minutes, followed closely by paramedics.
Officer Jennifer Walsh took Sarah's statement while her partner checked on the attacker, who was conscious but still having trouble breathing.
"Ma'am, can you walk me through what happened?" Officer Walsh asked, notepad ready. Sarah gave a carefully edited version of events.
She had been walking to her car when the man attacked her with a knife. She managed to knock the weapon away and defend herself until he fell down. She didn't mention her training, her tactical assessment of the threat, or the fact that she could have killed the attacker in several different ways if she had chosen to.
"You're lucky he didn't seriously hurt you," the officer said. "Most people freeze up in situations like this."
"I took some self-defense classes in college," Sarah replied. "I guess the training stayed with me." The paramedics determined that the attacker had suffered a concussion and possible cracked ribs. He would recover completely, which had been Sarah's intention. Her training emphasized using exactly enough force to neutralize a threat without causing unnecessary harm.
Detective Ray Harrison arrived as the paramedics were loading the suspect into their ambulance. He was a 20-year veteran with the kind of experienced eyes that noticed details other people missed. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Detective Harrison. I need to ask you a few more questions about what happened here."
Sarah nodded, already knowing that her story would be scrutinized more carefully now. Detective Harrison had the look of someone who had seen enough violence to recognize when something didn't add up. "You said you knocked the knife away and defended yourself. Can you be more specific about how you did that?" "It happened very fast," Sarah said. "He came at me with the knife, and I grabbed his arm and pushed him into the pillar.
Then, I think I need him, and he fell down." Detective Harrison looked at the unconscious suspect, then at Sarah's business attire, then back at the suspect.
"Ma'am, this individual is 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighs about 210 pounds. He's got prison tattoos and a record going back 15 years.
You're telling me you overpowered him in a knife fight?"
"I didn't overpower him," Sarah said carefully.
"I just defended myself."
"Maybe he slipped or hit his head harder than I thought." The detective wasn't buying it, but he also didn't have any reason to doubt her story. The evidence supported self-defense, and the attacker would face charges for assault with a deadly weapon. After taking down her contact information and explaining the legal process, he let her go. Sarah drove home to her small house in the suburbs, her hands perfectly steady on the steering wheel. She had handled the situation exactly as her training dictated: neutralize the threat, minimize collateral damage, avoid unnecessary attention from authorities. But, as she pulled into her driveway, Sarah realized that something had changed. For 25 years, she had carried skills that she hoped she would never need to use. Tonight, she had discovered that when the moment came, everything her father's team had taught her worked exactly as intended. The quiet accountant who brought cookies to office parties had just disabled a career criminal without breaking a sweat. And, somewhere in the back of her mind, Sarah wondered if this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. Inside her house, Sarah poured herself a glass of wine and sat in her kitchen, thinking about the phone call she would need to make. Mike Torres, now retired from active duty, had made her promise years ago that she would contact him if she ever had to use her training in a real situation. If your cover gets blown, he had warned her, there might be consequences you haven't thought about.
Sarah had always assumed he was being overly paranoid. Now she wasn't so sure. The detective's suspicion was just the beginning.
If someone started digging into her background, they might discover that the mild-mannered accountant Sarah Mitchell had capabilities that didn't match her cover story. She looked at her reflection in the kitchen window and saw what everyone else saw, a middle-aged professional woman in a wrinkled business suit. But, underneath that carefully maintained exterior was someone who could handle threats that would overwhelm trained police officers. Tomorrow she would go back to her accounting firm and file quarterly reports and attend budget meetings. But, tonight, Sarah Mitchell had rediscovered who she really was underneath 25 years of careful disguise. And, she had a feeling her quiet life was about to become much more complicated. 3 days after the parking garage incident, Sarah noticed she was being watched. The surveillance was professional, different vehicles, rotating personnel, careful positioning that avoided direct line of sight. To most people, it would have been invisible. But, Sarah's training had included counter-surveillance techniques that made her acutely aware when someone was tracking her movements. She first spotted the gray sedan on Tuesday morning as she left for work. It maintained proper following distance and changed lanes naturally, but the driver made the classic mistake of staying behind her for too many turns. By Wednesday, she had identified at least 3 different vehicles and 5 different operatives. Someone was very interested in the accountant who had overpowered an armed attacker. Sarah maintained her normal routine while conducting her own surveillance detection runs. She stopped for coffee at unusual times, took different routes to work, made unexpected shopping trips that would force followers to reveal themselves. The team watching her was good, but not quite good enough to avoid detection by someone with her level of training. On Thursday morning, Sarah's phone rang while she was reviewing client files at her desk. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, the voice was familiar.
"Sarah, this is Mike Torres. We need to talk."
Sarah's former trainer sounded tense, which was unusual for a man who had remained calm during firefights in 3 different countries. She glanced around the office to make sure none of her co-workers were listening before responding. "I was planning to call you," she said quietly. "I had to use some of the skills you taught me a few days ago." "I know. That's why we need to meet today. There are some things about your father's work that I never told you." They arranged to meet at a small restaurant 30 miles outside the city, the kind of place where conversations wouldn't be overheard and surveillance would be difficult to maintain. Sarah told her boss she had a family emergency and left work early, taking a route that included several surveillance detection maneuvers. The restaurant was nearly empty when Sarah arrived. Mike Torres sat in a back booth where he could watch both entrances, looking older than she remembered but still carrying himself with the alert posture of an active operator. He stood when she approached, giving her a brief hug that felt more like a tactical assessment. "You look good, Sarah. The accounting life seems to agree with you." "It did until 3 days ago," she replied, sliding into the booth across from him. "Now I have federal agents following me around like I'm some kind of terrorist." Mike's expression darkened. "They're not federal agents. At least, not the kind you're thinking of." He signaled the waitress for coffee, then leaned forward and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Your father didn't just work as a private military contractor after he left the SEALs. He was part of a very specialized program that technically doesn't exist." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. "What kind of program?" "The kind where operators maintain civilian cover identities for years or decades, staying in place until they're needed for missions that require people who don't officially exist. Your father was one of about 50 assets scattered around the country, living normal lives while maintaining their tactical capabilities." "And, you think I'm part of this program somehow?" Mike shook his head. "I think you were being prepared as a potential recruit, but your father died before the process was completed. The training we gave you was supposed to be preliminary assessment.
We never intended for you to become a sleeper asset. Sarah processed this information while watching Mike's body language for signs of deception. Her training included techniques for detecting lies, and everything about Mike's demeanor suggested he was telling the truth. So who's watching me now? The same people who ran your father's program. They've been monitoring you for 25 years, Sarah. Every job you've held, every place you've lived, every relationship you've had. They were waiting to see if you would ever use your training. The coffee arrived, giving Sarah a moment to absorb the implications. She had spent her entire adult life thinking she was living normally, building a career and maintaining a secret hobby that kept her connected to her father's memory. In reality, she had been under observation by intelligence operatives who saw her as a potential asset. What do they want from me now? That depends on how you handled the situation in the parking garage. If you used standard civilian self-defense techniques, they might decide you're not worth recruiting. But, if you demonstrated tactical proficiency. Sarah remembered the precise way she had disarmed and incapacitated her attacker. The detective's suspicious questions. The professional surveillance team that had been following her for 3 days. I handled it the way you taught me to handle it, she said. Mike nodded grimly. Then, they know you're operational. And that means you have about 24 hours before they make you an offer. What kind of offer? The kind you can't refuse. Sarah, these people don't just recruit assets. They create them. If you're valuable enough to them, they'll find ways to make sure you stay valuable. Leverage over your life, your career, your relationships. They'll make it impossible for you to say no. Sarah stared out the restaurant window at the parking lot, automatically checking for surveillance vehicles. She found 2, parked in positions that provided overlapping fields of view. The watchers weren't even trying to stay hidden anymore. What are my options? Mike reached into his jacket and placed a small electronic device on the table between them. It looked like an ordinary cell phone, but Sarah recognized it as an encrypted communication unit. Option 1, you go home, wait for them to make contact, and spend the rest of your life working for people you'll never meet on missions you can't talk about. The pay is excellent, and you'll be serving your country, but you'll never have a normal life again. And option 2? You disappear. Tonight. I can get you new identification documents and enough cash to start over somewhere they'll never find you. But you'd have to leave everything behind, your career, your house, your entire identity. Sarah picked up the communication device, feeling its weight in her palm. 25 years of careful training had led to this moment, sitting in a roadside restaurant making a decision that would determine the rest of her life. There's a third option, she said slowly. Mike raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I meet with them. I hear what they have to say. And then, I decide whether to work with them or against them. Sarah, these aren't people you work against. They have resources and capabilities that would make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. So did the people you taught me to fight? You and my father spent 25 years preparing me for situations I couldn't imagine. Maybe this is one of them. Mike was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with the same analytical expression she remembered from her earliest training sessions. Finally, he nodded. Your father would be proud of you. And probably terrified for you, but proud. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small leather case containing what appeared to be ordinary business cards. If you decide to take the meeting, these will help. They contain microtransmitters that will let me track your location. If something goes wrong, I'll know where to find you. Sarah pocketed the cards and the communication device. How will they make contact? Probably tomorrow morning. They like to approach people at their workplace, where the target feels safe and in control. Don't let that fool you, they'll have the building secured and your escape routes mapped before they even introduce themselves. They finished their coffee in relative silence, both understanding that this might be the last normal conversation they would ever have. When they stood to leave, Mike gave her another hug, this one lasting longer than tactical necessity required. Remember everything we taught you, he said.
And remember that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that offers to help you. Sarah drove back to the city taking a different route, noting that her surveillance team had expanded to include at least 6 vehicles. Whatever tomorrow's meeting would bring, her mysterious watchers were taking no chances on losing track of her.
That evening, Sarah sat in her home office surrounded by 25 years of carefully organized financial records.
Her life looked normal from the outside: tax returns, mortgage payments, retirement account statements. But, hidden between the legitimate documents were training certifications, equipment purchase receipts, and contact information for people whose official identities were classified. She opened her laptop and began composing what might be her last normal email to her boss, explaining that a family emergency would require her to take indefinite leave from the accounting firm.
If Mike was right about tomorrow's meeting, Sarah Mitchell the accountant would soon cease to exist. The irony wasn't lost on her.
She had spent her entire adult life hiding her true capabilities behind the facade of a mild-mannered office worker. Now, just when she thought that facade had served its purpose, she was about to discover that her real life was just beginning. Outside her window, she could see the dark sedan that had been parked across the street since she returned from dinner with Mike.
The occupants weren't even pretending to be casual observers anymore.
Tomorrow would bring answers to questions she had carried for 25 years, starting with who had really been watching over her since her father's death. Sarah made one final entry in her personal journal, a habit she had maintained since college: the accountant is about to meet her employers. I suspect they've been paying her salary all along. She placed the journal in her wall safe along with her father's military decorations and the classified training manuals Mike had given her over the years. Whatever happened tomorrow, Sarah wanted to preserve some record of who she had been before her life changed forever. As she prepared for bed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the parking garage attack had been more than random crime.
The timing was too convenient, the surveillance response too immediate.
Someone had been waiting for her to reveal her capabilities, and now they were ready to collect on an investment that had been 25 years in the making.
Sarah arrived at her office building Friday morning to find 2 people waiting in the lobby.
The man wore a perfectly tailored gray suit and carried himself with the rigid posture of military background trying to pass for civilian. The woman appeared to be in her 30s, dressed professionally but with the kind of alertness in her eyes that suggested extensive tactical training. They approached Sarah as she headed for the elevator bank, timing their intercept with the precision of a well-rehearsed operation.
Ms. Mitchell, I'm Agent David Chen, and this is Agent Rebecca Summers. We'd like to speak with you about the incident in the parking garage earlier this week. Sarah noticed immediately that neither agent had shown identification or specified which agency they represented. She also noted that Chen's suit jacket was tailored to conceal a shoulder holster, while Summers wore a blazer that could hide equipment along her waistline. I already spoke with the police about that, Sarah replied, keeping her voice neutral. Is there something else I can help you with? Actually, yes, Agent Summers said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We'd like to discuss some aspects of your background that might be relevant to your recent encounter. Sarah felt the weight of Mike Torres' communication device in her purse and the business cards in her jacket pocket. This was the moment he had warned her about, when her watchers would finally make direct contact. I'm not sure what you mean, but I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Perhaps we could schedule something for later in the week? Agent Chen stepped slightly closer, not enough to seem threatening but close enough to establish control of the conversation. Actually, Ms. Mitchell, I think you'll find that your schedule has just been cleared. Your supervisor received a call this morning explaining that you'll be unavailable for the rest of the day. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. These people had authority that extended far beyond normal law enforcement. They could manipulate her workplace, her schedule, probably her entire life with a few phone calls. In that case, I suppose we should talk. Would you prefer to use one of the conference rooms upstairs? We have a more suitable location arranged, Agent Summers said. Our vehicle is waiting outside. Sarah's training screamed warnings about getting into vehicles with unknown operatives, but she also recognized that refusing would likely escalate the situation beyond her ability to control. She had committed to hearing them out, which meant accepting some level of risk. The vehicle turned out to be a black SUV with tinted windows, the kind of anonymous government transportation that blended into urban traffic. Sarah noted at least 3 additional vehicles in the area that were probably part of their security detail. Agent Chen sat across from her while Agent Summers took the front passenger seat. The driver was introduced only as Collins and drove with the kind of tactical awareness that suggested extensive training in evasive maneuvers. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as they pulled away from her office building.
"A secure location where we can speak freely," Chen replied.
"Don't worry, Ms. Mitchell. We're not kidnapping you. We're offering you a job." The drive took 30 minutes through increasingly rural areas outside the city.
Sarah used the time to study her companions and assess her situation. Chen appeared to be the senior operative, probably mid-40s with the weathered look of someone who had spent time in combat zones. Summers seemed younger but carried herself with the confidence of extensive field experience.
Their destination was a nondescript office building that could have housed insurance adjusters or real estate agents.
The only hint of its true purpose was the sophisticated security system and the way other personnel moved through the hallways with purposeful alertness. Sarah was escorted to a conference room on the 3rd floor, where a third person was waiting. This man was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and the kind of quiet authority that suggested very senior rank in whatever organization this was.
"Ms. Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to meet with us.
I'm Director James Walsh.
Please, have a seat."
Sarah chose a chair that gave her a view of the door and windows, automatically positioning herself for tactical advantage even in a conference room setting. Director Walsh noticed the maneuver and smiled approvingly.
"Your father would be proud of your situational awareness. James Mitchell was one of the finest operators I ever had the privilege to work with." "You knew my father?" "I recruited him. Just like I recruited Mike Torres and the other men who trained you over the past 25 years. Your father didn't die in a random contractor operation, Ms. Mitchell. He died protecting an asset who was providing intelligence that saved American lives." Sarah felt the pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed beginning to fall into place. "You've been watching me since I was 18.
"We've been investing in you," Director Walsh corrected. "Your father believed you had the potential to follow in his footsteps, but he wanted the choice to be yours. We agreed to provide the training and wait to see what kind of person you became." Agent Chen activated a tablet and placed it on the table in front of Sarah. The screen showed what appeared to be her complete life history, education records, employment history, financial information, even medical records she thought were private.
"You've built an impressive cover identity," Agent Summers said.
"Senior accountant at a respected firm, exemplary performance reviews, no criminal record, no suspicious associations.
To anyone looking, you're exactly what you appear to be."
"Except for the part where I disabled an armed attacker in 8 seconds, Sarah replied. Director Walsh leaned forward.
"That incident wasn't random, Ms. Mitchell. We arranged it."
Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her.
"You what?" "The man who attacked you is a petty criminal we've used for testing purposes before. He was instructed to attempt a robbery, but we made sure he was equipped with a blade that would break on impact rather than cause serious injury. We needed to see how you would respond under genuine stress. You could have gotten me killed."
"No," Agent Chen said firmly. "We had 3 snipers positioned in that parking garage, along with a tactical response team standing by.
If you had been unable to handle the situation, we would have intervened.
But we needed to know if 25 years of training had produced someone we could use." Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor.
"Use for what?" Director Walsh gestured for her to sit back down. "The same work your father did. Deep cover operations that require people who don't officially exist.
You've already proven you can maintain a civilian identity while preserving tactical capabilities."
"That's exactly what we need." "And if I say no?" "Then, you go back to your accounting job and live your life."
"We'll continue monitoring you from a distance, but we won't interfere with your chosen career path." Sarah studied Walsh's face for signs of deception. Her training included techniques for detecting lies, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he was being completely honest about letting her refuse.
"That's it? No threats, no coercion?" Ms. Mitchell, we don't recruit people by force. We recruit them by showing them opportunities to make a difference.
Your father prevented 2 terrorist attacks and gathered intelligence that led to the capture of a human trafficking network. Mike Torres stopped a plot to assassinate a foreign minister whose death would have destabilized an entire region. Agent Summers activated another screen on the tablet, this one showing surveillance photos of various people in civilian settings.
These are some of our current assets.
A teacher in Denver who speaks 6 languages and specializes in infiltrating international criminal organizations. A mechanic in Atlanta who has prevented 3 separate attempts to smuggle weapons into the country. A librarian in Seattle who maintains cover while conducting cyber operations against foreign intelligence services.
They look so normal, Sarah said quietly.
That's the point, Director Walsh replied.
The most effective operatives are the ones nobody suspects.
You've spent 25 years proving you can be invisible in plain sight while maintaining skills that rival those of active duty special forces personnel. Sarah looked around the conference room, noting details she had catalogued unconsciously when she entered.
2 exits, reinforced walls, soundproofing that would prevent eavesdropping.
These people had created an entire infrastructure around the concept of hidden capabilities.
What would my missions involve?
That would depend on your aptitudes and preferences.
Some of our assets focus on intelligence gathering.
Others provide security for sensitive operations. A few specialize in direct action when conventional forces can't be used.
Agent Chen pulled up another screen showing what appeared to be mission summaries.
Last month, one of our assets prevented an attempted bombing at a shopping mall by identifying the perpetrator during her normal morning coffee run.
2 weeks ago, another asset gathered intelligence on a money laundering operation by doing their taxes. You're telling me people are conducting covert operations while living completely normal lives?
The most normal lives possible, Director Walsh confirmed. Because normal people can go places and see things that trained operatives never could. Your accounting background alone gives you access to financial information and business relationships that would take months for a conventional agent to develop. Sarah realized that her entire career might have been shaped by these people. Her job at the accounting firm, her client base, even her office location, all of it could have been arranged to position her for eventual recruitment.
How long have you been planning this conversation?
Since you were 22 and chose accounting over law enforcement, Agent Summers said. We weren't sure you would ever develop the capabilities we needed, but Mike Torres kept reporting that you were exceeding expectations in every area of training.
And, now? Director Walsh stood up and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot.
Now we're offering you the chance to honor your father's legacy while serving your country in ways that will never appear in any official record. The salary is competitive with your current position, but the benefits package includes support services you can't imagine.
Such as? New identities when necessary.
Extraction from compromised situations.
Medical care that doesn't appear in any database. Legal protection that extends far beyond normal government employee coverage. Sarah looked at the tablet screen showing photos of assets who looked like they could be her neighbors or co-workers. Teachers and mechanics and librarians who carried secrets that could affect national security. I need time to think about this.
Of course.
But I should mention that your decision needs to be made soon.
Your cover identity was compromised the moment you demonstrated tactical proficiency in that parking garage. If you decline our offer, we'll need to arrange for your relocation and identity change for your own protection.
Protection from who?
Other intelligence services who might be interested in recruiting someone with your capabilities. Criminal organizations who might want to neutralize someone who could threaten their operations. Your father had enemies, Ms. Mitchell, and some of them have long memories.
Sarah understood the implicit message.
Her quiet life as an accountant was over regardless of what decision she made. The only question was whether she would continue that life under the protection of her father's organization or disappear into a new identity somewhere else. Agent Chen handed her a secure phone similar to the one Mike Torres had given her.
This will ring once when you need to give us your answer. Until then, return to your normal routine.
But be aware that you're now a person of interest to people beyond our organization.
The drive back to her office building passed in contemplative silence.
Sarah stared out the window at the ordinary world she had inhabited for 25 years, knowing that everything she saw would look different once she made her decision. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Sarah noticed at least 2 other vehicles taking up positions to maintain surveillance. Whether they were there to protect her or monitor her, she couldn't be sure. Inside her office building, Sarah sat at her desk surrounded by quarterly reports and tax documents, trying to imagine explaining to her coworkers that she might be leaving to become a covert operative for an organization that didn't officially exist. The secure phone sat silent in her purse, waiting for her to make the most important decision of her life. Sarah spent the weekend researching everything she could find about covert operations, deep cover assets, and the kinds of organizations that recruited civilians for intelligence work. Most of what she found was speculation and conspiracy theories, but between the lines she began to understand the scope of what Director Walsh was offering. On Sunday evening, she made the call to Mike Torres using the encrypted phone he had given her. "I met with them," she said when he answered.
"I figured you would. What's your assessment?" Sarah described the meeting while walking through her neighborhood, automatically checking for surveillance vehicles. She found 3, positioned at different points along her usual route. "They're legitimate," Mike said after hearing her report. Director Walsh ran operations in 6 different countries before taking over domestic recruitment. Agent Chan was one of your father's teammates before moving into training roles.
"I don't know Agent Summers personally, but her credentials check out."
"So you think I should accept their offer?"
Mike was quiet for a long moment.
"I think your father would want you to have the same choice he had.
He could have stayed in the regular SEALs and had a conventional military career. Instead, he chose to work for people who needed someone with his specific capabilities."
"Did he ever regret that choice?"
"Not the work itself. But he worried about what would happen to you if something went wrong. That's why he insisted on training you instead of just recruiting you immediately."
Sarah understood the distinction.
Her father had wanted her to be capable of protecting herself rather than dependent on protection from others. 25 years of training had been his way of ensuring she would never be helpless, regardless of what career path she chose. On Monday morning, Sarah made her decision. She activated the secure phone Director Walsh had given her and waited for the callback that came within minutes.
"Ms. Mitchell, have you made your decision?"
"I have conditions," Sarah said.
"I'm listening."
"I want to maintain my current cover identity as long as possible.
I've spent 25 years building Sarah Mitchell the accountant, and I don't want to throw that away unless absolutely necessary. That's actually preferable from our perspective.
The longer you can maintain your established identity, the more valuable you are to us.
I want regular contact with Mike Torres.
He's been my primary trainer for 25 years, and I trust his judgment.
Mike will be your handler for at least the first year of operations. After that, we'll reassess based on mission requirements.
And I want some kind of proof that this organization actually serves American interests rather than private ones." Director Walsh was quiet for a moment. "That's a reasonable request, but it will require a security clearance that takes time to process."
"Are you willing to begin training while we arrange your background investigation?" "What kind of training?"
"Advanced techniques that build on what you already know. Cyber operations, advanced surveillance and counter-surveillance, specialized weapons training."
"Think of it as graduate school for what Mike taught you." Sarah looked around her office at the accounting work that had defined her professional life.
Quarterly reports and tax documents suddenly seemed very small compared to the scope of what Walsh was describing.
"When would I start?" "This evening, if you're ready. We have a training facility about an hour outside the city.
You'll spend weekends there for the next 6 months, maintaining your regular work schedule during the week." That afternoon, Sarah submitted a request for flexible scheduling to her supervisor, citing the need to care for an elderly relative who required weekend assistance. It was the kind of lie that good operatives told, technically plausible and impossible to verify without extensive investigation. The training facility looked like a corporate retreat center, complete with conference rooms and residential accommodations. Only the security checkpoints and restricted access areas hinted at its true purpose. Sarah's first instructor was a woman about her own age who introduced herself simply as Karen and demonstrated capabilities that made Sarah's existing skills look elementary. "Everything you've learned so far was preparation," Karen explained as they stood in what appeared to be a normal hotel room. "Now we're going to teach you how to use those skills while maintaining perfect cover." The room transformed before Sarah's eyes as Karen pointed out concealed cameras, hidden weapons caches, and communication equipment disguised as ordinary furnishings. What had looked like a standard business hotel room was actually a sophisticated operations center. Your missions will often require you to work in environments where you can't reveal your true capabilities. You'll need to gather intelligence, neutralize threats, and complete objectives while appearing to be nothing more than an accountant attending a business conference. Over the following months, Sarah learned techniques that redefined her understanding of covert operations. How to plant surveillance devices while conducting routine tax consultations. How to identify foreign operatives among her clients without arousing suspicion. How to use her accounting expertise to track money laundering operations and terrorist financing networks. The training was more intensive than anything Mike Torres had put her through, but it built naturally on the foundation he had provided. Sarah discovered that 25 years of preparation had given her advantages that even experienced operatives sometimes lacked. Her first real mission came in December, 6 months after beginning her advanced training. "We need someone to attend a tax planning seminar in Miami," Director Walsh explained during a secure video call. One of the attendees is suspected of using his accounting firm to launder money for a human trafficking organization. Sarah's role was simple in concept but complex in execution. Attend the seminar as a legitimate participant, establish professional contact with the suspect, and position herself to monitor his activities without arousing suspicion. The mission required her to be exactly what she appeared to be, a senior accountant seeking continuing education credits while networking with colleagues. The only difference was that one of those colleagues was being investigated by an organization that didn't officially exist. Sarah flew to Miami on a Thursday morning, carrying nothing more suspicious than presentation materials and business cards. Her weapons, surveillance equipment, and communication devices were provided through established networks that maintained cover identities for exactly these purposes. The seminar was held at a beachfront resort that catered to business conferences. Sarah registered under her real name, attended scheduled sessions, and participated in networking events like any other professional seeking to advance her career. The suspect, Robert Henley, was a partner at a mid-sized accounting firm based in Houston. He appeared to be exactly what his cover story claimed, a tax specialist focusing on international business transactions. Only Sarah's training allowed her to notice the subtle indicators that suggested his real business involved activities that had nothing to do with legitimate tax planning. Sarah established contact during a coffee break on the second day, striking up a conversation about regulatory changes that affected international money transfers. Henley seemed eager to discuss technical details that most accountants would find tediously boring. "You seem to know a lot about offshore banking structures," Sarah observed, careful to frame her interest as professional curiosity. "I have some clients with complex international needs," Henley replied. "The regulations keep changing, but there are always ways to structure transactions that satisfy everyone involved." Over the next 2 days, Sarah gradually deepened her professional relationship with Henley while documenting everything she learned about his methods and client base. The information she gathered would be analyzed by specialists who could determine which transactions were legitimate and which were designed to hide criminal activity. Sarah's cover remained intact throughout the mission. To Henley and everyone else at the seminar, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a competent accountant who asked intelligent questions and demonstrated expertise in her field. The mission concluded successfully when Sarah returned to her regular job with enough intelligence to support a multi-agency investigation that would ultimately shut down a trafficking network operating across 3 states. 6 months later, Sarah received commendation letter that would never appear in any official record. "Your professionalism and tactical expertise contributed to an operation that rescued 37 victims of human trafficking and led to the prosecution of 12 individuals involved in organized crime." The letter was signed by Director Walsh and filed in a secure location that Sarah would never see again. Sarah Mitchell, senior accountant, returned to her quiet life of quarterly reports and tax consultations. But now her work had a different dimension. Her accounting expertise had become a weapon against criminal organizations that used legitimate businesses to hide illegal activities. Over the following year, Sarah completed 8 more missions while maintaining her cover identity. She attended business conferences, conducted client consultations, and filed tax returns like any other accountant. The only difference was that some of her professional activities were designed to serve national security interests rather than purely commercial ones. Her colleagues at the accounting firm never suspected that their quiet, dependable coworker had capabilities that extended far beyond financial analysis. Sarah continued to bring homemade cookies to office parties and maintain the same professional relationships she had built over 25 years. But, late at night, when she reviewed mission reports in her home office, Sarah understood that she had finally discovered the purpose her father had envisioned for her training. She was protecting people who would never know they needed protection, serving her country in ways that would never appear in any public record. The accountant who had disabled an armed attacker in a parking garage had become something much more significant, a guardian operating in plain sight, using skills that nobody suspected she possessed to serve causes larger than herself. And, in a secure facility outside the city, Director Walsh maintained a file on Sarah Mitchell that contained a single notation: asset performing above expectations. Recommend for advanced operations requiring extended deep cover deployment. Sarah's real career was just beginning, hidden beneath the careful facade of an ordinary life that had never been ordinary at all. Her father's legacy lived on through work that honored his memory while serving the same principles he had fought to protect. The quiet accountant had found her true calling, one mission at a time.